Cheryl Sew Hoy, thank you for joining me.
Hi, Bora. I'm really happy and excited to be here.
Cheryl, you have a really interesting background. You had an industrial engineering degree from Cornell University, and that wasn't enough. You had to get your engineering master's. You kept going, and then you had a really interesting career full of variety. You were in VC. You had your own startup. You sold your startup to Walmart Labs, and then you did an innovation project with the Malaysian government, and then we have Tiny Health. I'd like to get a little bit of a summary of how you ended up starting Tiny Health, and what led you to it.
Yeah, sure. So it's a little bit of a long story, but I'll try to make it short and feel free to let me know, where, I should naturally kind of stop. So after I sold my company, I went back to lead innovation in Southeast Asia, as you mentioned, based in Malaysia. And that was sort of partially a White House initiative, like White House with the Malaysian government at the time. So I did that for 2 years and then hosted a really big entrepreneurship conference there, 5 days. That's where I met my husband. He was the COO of 99 Designs, which is kind of the agency that you would go to get your logo if you're starting a new company, right? If you're familiar with that. So fell in love, and then I told him I was coming back to SF, and he came with me. So after that stint, we got married and had kids, and I was trying to figure out what to do next. Because I sold my company prior to Walmart Labs, as you mentioned, and at first was really resisting building something in D2C, which
Why?
was kind of my previous company. Well, we kind of ended up pivoting to B2B model to retailers from D2C because it was just really, at the time, this is like 2010 when I started the company and I sold it in 2013. I think we were a digital wallet platform before cryptocurrency was a thing to take basically your Groupon, your daily deals from Living Social and Groupon. At the time, there was a lot of these daily deals, if you remember the craze of it. So we started there storing vouchers that had a value. And eventually we were going to do gift cards and airline miles, anything that had a digital value that could expire to remind you to use it. You can trade it in the marketplace and things like that. I think that at that time it was more like we were too dependent on the Groupon platform. So when Groupon went under after the IPO, I remember that time, it all kind of like blew up. Our business was affected because we were too tied in with a different platform. So that lesson from selling that first company, one of the lessons I learned was kind of not to be too reliant on a major platform that can go under anytime. So when they went down, we were like, but we have all these plans to integrate gift cards and airline miles, but we started with daily deals and was too kind of like Groupon was just such an outsized player that when we went out to raise funding, it was just really hard because we were so tied to daily deals. So we pivoted to do digital coupons, like your paper coupons, your $1 off your Colgate coupons, so traditional coupons. So pivoted to digitizing that experience because it was very paper. And by nature of that, we learned all about the retailer's couponing strategy and business, which is a totally different business, right? So that became B2B, it was just by accident in a way. And it was like, it's interesting because I felt like it wasn't for me. I didn't really like truly love that B2B nature of it. So when it came time to raising another round of funding, and Walmart Labs at the time was interested in acquiring us, we just thought it was better to get an exit. And we became the team that helped Walmart. The new Walmart.com was launching, and I became that product manager, like refreshing the storefront page, integrating the coupon strategy. Because Walmart Labs or Walmart traditionally, their tagline is everyday low prices. They baked in the discount and traditionally didn't accept coupons, but they realized consumer psychology, people want to use coupons and feel like they brought something in and they, got a deal, right? So eventually, it was very lucky that they were wanting a coupon strategy. And we were the team they acquired to help them with that strategy. So that was kind of my first exit. And then I took I went back to do this nonprofit innovation thing. My husband came back, and I was an entrepreneur in residence at Silicon Valley Bank at a time for like a year and a half, while I was dabbling in cryptocurrency at the time. Launched the Cosmos network platform. So if you're in crypto, you would know what that is. And then at the time, kind of like was really trying to build something in SaaS, to be frank, just because SaaS was growing really quickly and had really good traction. I was just trying to build something different this time around. Then I had my two kids. I had my daughter about 6.5 years ago in 2018, and then I had my son in 2020. So it was really from my two kids' experiences. I had very different births with them, and they have very different health outcomes. One was born through C-section, my daughter, my first child, and she ended up having a lot of eczema, food allergies, sensitivities, sleep issues, colicky issues, just like a ton of like really common but not normal infant, related problems. And then my son was vaginally born, and he didn't have any of the issues his sister had. So I was kind of like still in that EIR stage where I was trying to find an idea for this next company. And I think I was in this community called On Deck. Have you heard of On Deck?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's, I was in On Deck 1 as a sponsor. I was representing SVB as a sponsor, so it was kind of in that first cohort in SF in person, where we met other fellow founders who were, working at other startups or trying to figure out what startup to build. So it was really good, tight community to be a part of. And then I joined properly the second cohort, ODF 2. And then ODF 3 was when COVID happened, actually. So in ODF 2, I remember like sitting down with a few friends who were former founders as well, so second-time founders, and we were all working on our ideas. And I told them about my experience, my daughter, and her. I realized that her eczema and food sensitivities and all that is related to her gut health. It was because she didn't pass through my vaginal canal, through the C-section, and then through the operation, she was exposed to antibiotics from my C-section. So her gut at birth was disrupted, probably had a lot of unfriendly bacteria. And I wish, I can turn back time and kind of like intervene early enough, right? Because there is a lot of literature. I was doing tons of research at the time. I was very lucky. I had a lot of time on my hands. I had 6 months off at the time when I had her. So I was looking into all these studies around C-section babies having a different gut from vaginally born babies. Or it's not just C-section babies. Any babies exposed to antibiotics in early life can have a disrupted gut, and that leads to a bunch of chronic conditions in early life that also leads to chronic conditions in later life. So future metabolic health issues, autoimmune issues can all be linked to the first 1,000 days. And if you want to dig back to the literature, your baby's lifelong immune system is being trained by these microbes, the gut microbiome. So it became such an important topic for me. I was looking into a lot of these intervention. And then when I had my son, he was, I kind of knew what to expect and how to course correct. And he was vaginally born, and he didn't have any of the same issues. So I remember my friends sitting down at like an on deck kind of group meeting, and they were like, Cheryl, you should just start this company. It's so on brand for you. You have the story as a founder, and trust is so important in the space. And especially there was a previous company, a microbiome sequencing company called uBiome. Have you heard of uBiome?
I have not heard of that one.
So uBiome was like the first company that made stool sampling. So your gut microbiome is measured from your stool. It measures all the microbes in your large intestines that represents your gut health. So they were the first company. I think they launched maybe in 2015, I want to say, and made at-home testing for gut health popular. So you would just get a kit at home and test yourself. But unfortunately, they shut down because their leadership had made huge insurance fraud. So they're now FBI wanted, and they ran away. So some of the guys in my group had done a ubiome test and they were showing me the reports and they were like, you can do so much better. The science was actually quite cutting edge. It was just management mishandling that led the company to go down. They were like YC funded. 8VC, I think, led their Series A, had huge funding, huge noise in Silicon Valley. It was kind of an up-and-coming company. It's just very unfortunate that it kind of went downhill. So they were like, you can be that version. And with your story, with your kids, it's such a compelling story if we create a company that's focused on the mom and the baby to begin with. So at first I was resisting that because I'm like, being a mom and as a former entrepreneur already kind of a little bit changes your identity. Like I used to be this founder and had an exit and now I'm just a mom. And then, at first I was like, to create a company that's very mom related was like, I wanted to create a SaaS company, right? But in the end, I was actually very compelled by the mission because it was the science around the first 1,000 days. And then I look at the stats, 1 in 2 kids today have a chronic condition, which is a lot and it's not normal, right? And we can change that. So I really fell in love with the company mission and how much evidence there is. But I wanted to prove it to myself, right? I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a microbiologist. How am I going to break into this very scientific industry that I had, I had no clue in as much as I can just read a clinical study. That's all I knew. So to me, then it created this okay, it's a mom kind of product, whatever, baby product, but it's so challenging because I have this, I have to build this scientific knowledge in myself and trust, right? So that became a more challenging startup for me to then tackle. So I decided, okay, well, let's do it. If we women, and I realized too, if we women don't solve women health issues and problems that we intimately understand, who's going to solve it, right? So it takes someone who has entrepreneurial knowledge and personal experience. I think it's very valuable in building a company. And that's what I look out for when I used to angel invest, is who has deep expertise in a certain industry that maybe no one else has. And that will be their competitive advantage, right? So for me, it was that personal story and kind of I was an engineer, so I already had the scientific kind of, and a very technical sort of background, and coming at it from a business challenge. There's no baby microbiome product. There's nothing I can use to course correct my kids' microbiome at a time. So let's create and see if there's a market for it. So that's kind of how the idea was born and how I got started.
Mm-hmm. So this antibiotics leading to gut microbiome issues is something I experienced actually listening to you. It kind of, I had some flashbacks to my personal issues. I've never heard of gut related anything for most of my life up until just a couple of years ago when I had to go through some serious dental surgeries for several months, and I was taking antibiotics a lot, months and months. And then I started having other very serious health issues, and I was doing research on it. Of course, I didn't know if this is all true or not, but what I found out is that because of those antibiotics, it says antibiotics act like an atom bomb in your gut and destroys all of the gut microbiome, and it takes years to rebuild it back up. And because of that, I was having the issue, so I have to rebuild my gut microbiome. So, I don't know, first of all, is that true what I told you? I don't want to just say false things on the podcast.
Yeah, there is a book that I think you should get. It's called Missing Microbes by Martin Bleasier. Mm-hmm. And Missing Microbes meaning Marty talks about how antibiotic overuse in our society has led to complete microbes in our community missing. So when you take antibiotics, the thing is, doctors often prescribe it thinking you may have, bad bacteria, unfriendly bacteria, like E. coli or C. diff, whatever it is. Let's kill it, right? What they forget to tell us is that there's also a lot of beneficial bacteria in our gut that are so essential for metabolic health, for immune system, for 80% of our immune system is in our gut. So if you're kind of bombing the bad bacteria, that could be like 1 or 5% of your gut. You're also bombing the rest of the potentially 50% of good bacteria in your gut. So you can imagine what that does. And some of these good bacteria, like specifically bifidobacteria, archimendria, lactobacillus, you may have heard of them because if you buy a probiotic in the supermarket, usually it has bifidobacteria or lactobacillus and whatnot. They usually don't come back on its own. So you think it just recover, but if you don't take care to eat the right diets or supplement with the right probiotics, it may never come back. So some people who have done like daily antibiotics for like months long, and some people are on multiple doses, you're bombing your microbiome over and over again without intentionally restoring it, right? So it can lead to a lot of issues. And because there's this group of microbes that are antibiotic resistant now, so that even the bad bacteria that you were trying to bomb survives and causes more issues. They become stronger, right? Mm-hmm. So antibiotic overuse is an issue in the modern industrialized countries. And you're talking about you as an adult, like a couple of years ago, it's even more dire in kids. And the number one reason kids get antibiotics, apart from the 33% C-section rates, and I think something like half of moms get antibiotics during labor for preventative reasons. Ear infections are the other number one reason for toddlers to get antibiotics, right? But most ear infections are viral, caused by viruses. They're not even bacterial. So most of the time, you're giving your child antibiotics for no reason. So don't take this as medical advice, but I would say be your own advocate I'm now very conscious about any pharmaceutical medication, any antibiotics prescribed to me or my kids, my family. I seek alternatives. There are natural ways, natural remedies you can approach, whether herbs or spices or other forms of treatment before you go the route of bombing everything. Of course, sometimes antibiotics is medically necessary if you've exhausted all options. But then if you do give your child or yourself antibiotics, make sure you're kind of researching how to repopulate the missing microbes. So if not, in early childhood, again, these microbes are training your baby's immune system. It can lead to lifelong health issues, which are different from, say, like antibiotics you had a few years ago. Those are going to cause different issues from what your kids may have in the future. So it is very important, and I think this is like public education. Everyone should understand that your microbes are so important for your health and your overall well-being.
Mm-hmm. Cheryl, I want to dig in a little bit more. During those days, what you were describing, that your network was encouraging you that this is the perfect company for you to start because of your personal story, mm-hmm. but you having doubts due to like, what do I know about science? So that's very interesting to me. I'm very curious about it. This is where I try to put myself in your shoes and kind of think about the psychology of that moment, because mm-hmm. Those moments to me are how companies are born or not born, like, how people make decisions. I find it very interesting. So, let's say I'm an engineer with software startup building, exits, product management, then VC, thinking about new ideas. Then I have these personal experiences that seem like they're aligning, but at the same time, I'm not a scientist. So then it seems like, I'm encouraged by friends and colleagues, and now I'm kind of getting persuaded that I should be starting this. But now what do I do, right? So like I have had this with one of my babies, but is this really a thing? So you kind of have to really, prove that those issues really happen because of, too much antibiotics or, how did you do that research? To me, that research part of it is compelling to understand. How did you do the research? How did you test it? Or, like before deciding to start the company, even maybe early customer discovery, some validation that other parents were experiencing similar challenges. Mm-hmm. And then say that, okay, like this, there's something here and I have to go forward. And mm-hmm. then I want to see like how you went from that idea to the first product, actual mm-hmm. product.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. You very greatly summarized my initial part of the journey, and then at the point where I decided, okay, let's see if there's something a little bit more. When I was reading the literature, even before my daughter was born with the C-section, I was already kind of like, I knew this was a real thing because there's just hundreds of papers that, frankly, pretty much read hundreds of papers at a time. That one, I knew that the importance of gut microbiome in early life, and then two, there's interventions, because I didn't want to create a product where oops, there's just like nothing you can do about it. The most important thing is that there is something you can do about it, and you can change course. You can literally like change health outcomes from kids with chronic conditions to like kids with reduced chronic conditions, right? And so that became the overarching mission. And then it's like, is there a product like that out there? No, there isn't. Can I create one? Am I the right founder to create it? What kind of skills do I need to create it? And how would consumers even trust me? How would customers, my initial customers, trust me when I'm like a nobody? I don't have a PhD in anything. I'm not an MD. So what I did was I'm like, okay, I want to build a product that is very evidence-based and science-based, because you and I can always read a paper that's published, but how do I even know if that paper is high quality? What are things I don't know that I don't know? So I was just talking to a lot of people about the idea. And first, if they have the same problem or concern, and then, because you talk a lot about it, one of the founders in my network that encouraged me to start this said, oh, I kind of like explored this idea briefly, the same idea briefly with a Mayo Clinic microbiologist that he like met maybe a year ago. And he said, but he doesn't have a kid and he feels like it's a bit off brand for him. He just didn't feel like it was his thing to start a baby microbiome company. But he introduced me to Ruben Mars, who's at Mayo Clinic, and he became my founding advisor. So when I talked to Ruben, he was so passionate and knowledgeable about it. Sorry, I can edit that. He was so knowledgeable about it. And he felt like there should be a product like that in the market because science is pretty strong. And then so I'm like, okay, Ruben, would you mentor me? Because I know nothing about microbiology. I don't even know all the sequencing methods. How do I go about it? So I ended up chatting with him for an hour every week for a few months in the early days. And I remember taking copious amount of notes, just like on the difference between PCR technology and 16S and RNA and like shotgun. And I'm like, okay, which technology is the cutting edge technology that's being used to publish microbiome papers? And he said shotgun. So I then actually took an online course, a PhD level course, to learn about the sequencing method. So I put in like maybe 40 hours just watching this video and taking notes. And I felt like I needed to be an expert in it, right? If I'm going to start this company. And then I started also reaching out to professors at Johns Hopkins and Washington University and all that, and Stanford, who wrote these papers I was reading, because I wanted to chat with them. Do you think there's something here? Is this a product that I can create? And so that's how I recruited Noel Mueller, who wrote this paper called Mom Matters that I read, that told me there were a lot of interventions that I could do in early life. He also was on a paper that talked about vaginal seeding for C-section that really influenced me. And then he agreed to be my scientific advisor. So I had Ruben as my founding advisor, mentoring me, and I had Noel Mueller, and so I kind of like set out, okay, I need to build a board from all these academic institutions who are publishing papers to really guide me in this, right? So that was kind of like, I wanted to build a credible company that academia would respect. Because the thing with microbiome science is, like I mentioned with Ubiome, there's a lot of unfortunate companies who've taken missteps before. So I was kind of worried that it would be a little bit tainted, a little bit more challenging for me to build the company in the same space. So I wanted to take the approach of being very credible and scientific and respected by academia first. And then the second part was when I then wanted to, how can I build a community of parents who trust me, right? So sharing my personal experiences with my C-section born baby and my vaginally born baby was a starting point. So I built, when I was recruiting my advisors, then I kind of wanted to figure out what IP I should own, what should I outsource, and talk to a lot of ex-Ubiome people, the company that went under, to figure out what were their missteps aside from management, the management issues. Was the science credible? How can I take off where they left? And so I talked to maybe like 10, 20 people there, and I ended up recruiting some of them who were the actual scientists that were doing really groundbreaking work to help me. So they were contractors to help me build my pipeline. And I knew that from, again, coaching from Ruben, that the IP should be the pipeline, the bioinformatics pipeline. I should own that because that's the analysis of the microbiome, that's the reporting. If I have that piece, then I'm building real value in the company. This is not an off-the-shelf test. It's not something you can just, like white label. There's like companies, for example, now doing a lot of blood biomarker assessments, like, they're tying in your vitamin D and zinc levels and omega-3 and all that. But that's not an innovative test, right? Like you go to a Quest lab or LabCorp, you can get the same test. They're creating a better distribution for you or a better platform for you to view results. But what we're building here at Tiny Health is literally from scratch. We're like, there's no microbiome test out there that's like this. So I wanted to recruit 10 moms who was pregnant because I was then pregnant with my son at the time. And I was worried about another C-section. So I recruited 10 moms to join me in this study because I wanted to show that I can build this bioinformatics pipeline with some part-time folks and contractors. I self-funded it. So I put in $50K of my own money. I didn't want to raise a single VC dollar until I validated that I can actually build my IP by myself, right? So the study took a year because I had to do it when the moms were pregnant and then when their kids were about a year old. So actually it was about a year and a half. So that study was actually a year and a half. And then I processed their data and analyzed it myself. So building that pipeline took time for sure. It took about 2 years actually, with my own money and my own resources. So when we finally got all that data sequenced and found that the reports were helpful and useful and there was something we can do about it, that was when I raised my first seed round at the end of almost 2 years of starting the company, and validated on my own that there's something there. Then I raised my first seed round in 2021, and it was like a $4.5 million seed round.
Wow, 2 years validation. That's pretty long. And I was going to ask you, you answered some of it, but I wanted to kind of move on to the business building part of it, and I like this part to be a little bit practical advice for people who are looking to start their own, and also like you kind of figured out something that answers the why you question. In your case, this is how you answered it. Let's say they found something that's specific to them, but now they have to build a community of other like-minded, not necessarily maybe like-minded, but people who are experiencing the same type of things, like parents who have babies from like young 0 to 1 or 0 to 3. How do you find this community and build it? You said that you shared your experience. Where? How? A little bit more practical.
It was pandemic times too, right? When I was pregnant and my son was born in 2020. So it was like, at the time it was like everything moved online. So maybe that helped in a way because I just kind of shared with my network, like, hey, I'm recruiting 10 moms. Do you know anyone? So I think 3 of them I knew, or 3 or 4 of them I knew, and then 6 of them I didn't know was from referrals. And I knew there would be a little bit of bias in between. A lot of them were from California at the time where I was. Some was like, one was in Hawaii, one was, like definitely random places. But you just leverage your network, frankly. And I believe early on, as a practical tip, as a founder, you don't outsource anything. You do a lot of the work yourself, especially in customer development. So I had some help, like part-time help from a friend to interview them, but I did a lot of the interviews along the way. So 10 moms, interviewed them almost like every quarter. And when their babies were born, I was doing the survey, not like getting them to fill out a form, but I was literally like, kind of like taking their their survey answers and then asking more information, getting their sentiment around it. And when they did get the report, because they had to wait a year and a half to get all the reports, how did you feel about it? Everything was in like a Excel spreadsheet at a time. Now we have a whole web platform and a PDF report. Everything was so hacked together, right? But that's kind of how you need to do it. You need to like mock it up and make it look like a real report, even if it's on Excel, can turn that into a PDF and then get their reactions. And where are people nervous about? Like, what do they want to see? So a lot of initial work I did myself, and I think that's really important. And I think you learn a lot, right? I mean, I was fortunate to be also a mom, giving birth again at the time. And now I have all the data around my son's microbiome. And so that was very powerful for me. So when I went out to raise money, frankly, I had no product yet in a way. It was kind of a spreadsheet, some data analysis pipeline that was kind of almost done, but not quite. It needs to be finished by a full-time team. And, but the deck, and it helped that I was a prior founder who had an exit. So, and that was like crazy times during COVID, the VC entrepreneurial times in 2021 was almost like the peak of frothiness. So, raising money, I would never say is easy because it's always kind of hard, but easier than now, I would say, or subsequent rounds. I had wanted to raise 2 million at first, and that got filled in 2 weeks. And then that went up to 4.5 mil. So it took me 2 months to close 4.5 mil, which is like unheard of now. But at the time, it was even in my first check though, even though I tell the story now, it seemed easy. I frankly felt like I had 50 no's because I didn't have any product. It was just a deck and then me doing the study with 10 moms and having some data. It wasn't until I had this one VC write a 200K check. And that turned everything around, right? So I had small checks, like friends who put in 1K, 5K, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I told my husband, I remember taking a walk with him in the neighborhood. I'm like, should I lower half my valuation? Maybe it's too high from 10 mil to 5 mil, and then no one wants to fund me. And the next day, Ariana Tacker, one of my best VCs, put in 200K. And then all of a sudden, the 10 million went to 20 million, it was just crazy. And then she introduced me to a bunch of VCs. And then now all of a sudden I'm like hot shit, part of my French. But that was in 2021, right? So that was exciting. And then, so that was April 2021. And so I hired my first engineer, my first product manager, my first scientist. And then I was also able to get Ruben finally to leave Mayo Clinic for 6 months to come okay, this is a real thing now. We have to take the prototype that you've been mentoring me on and turn this into a real product. I need your help because I don't have a head of science. I don't have I'm not a scientist. Again, I still have that same problem. So he left. Again, timing was good. He could do that leave of absence at Mayo Clinic and got permission. So he came for 6 months. And then I'm like, you need to hire my scientists. So we hired Kim Sukum, who's my head of science now. She leads our entire science team. She's been with the company for over 3 years now. And so she built a lot of, Ruben and Kim built a lot of the building blocks of my science background. And then from April 2021, it took us another year to then 1 year to build the actual product. And we launched it in April 2022. So because it's kind of like a scientific product, right? It's not like, I wish this was an easy e-commerce product or D2C product. But because there's so much science involved and I wanted the science to be very credible and backed, you have to be very patient. And I remember after raising the 4.5 mil, my VCs were like, why are you not spending money? Why are you not spending money? I'm like, I don't have a product yet. So I know because that was the time when everyone was spending money, right? In 2020, 2021. But I was like, no, I ran my first company and I knew the pitfalls of a lot of founders, especially if they raise a lot of money, they spend a lot of money. And this time around, I just I want to be very cautious about how I spend money. So I told them, no, I'm not spending money until I launch my product. So until April 2022. And even when I launched the product, we were so careful about how we I wanted to do search because I wanted to see a bit of like Google ads, or sorry, Google search SEM basically to see what keywords hit. Because what were parents worried about? Are they worried about, are people searching for gut health, baby gut health? No, not at the time, right? And this is like 2022. But people, we learned we were searching for eczema, and eczema became a huge thing. And our acquisition cost is very low with eczema and allergies. Still a thing for us now. Like the number one reason people come to our platform is eczema and allergies. And then to a certain extent now constipation and sleep issues is kind of up and coming as well. But I knew then, okay, like we need to speak to the eczema because my kid had eczema, right? And allergies too. So it's like, makes sense. And also, so many people out there have the same issues and same concerns. So that made us very conscious about how we position our product from, just kind of a marketing perspective. Now, at the same time, there was another competitor actually in this space who was actually launching their gut test product. And they were starting out, but they they had a $300,000 budget for ads in like a month. I think my first ad budget was like $5,000 for a month or something, very low. So it's pretty crazy how sometimes if you don't understand how to test small and test, your marketing message and iterate quickly, you can very easily splash huge amounts. Like this other company hired a marketing agency to do it for them, and marketing agencies would charge you an arm and a leg, big campaigns and big splash launch, and did a huge launch and huge branding and packaging was really nice, all that. And I later found out that their customer acquisition cost was like $500 per user. And we were like, ours was like at the time, $50 or something like that, or maybe, I can't remember, maybe less. But it's kind of like because I didn't know much in marketing, like paid marketing too. So I hired a freelancer to work with me. Because again, I believe in the early days, again, another practical advice is don't hire big agencies and outsource all the work. If any, I think that you should hire a freelancer who's an expert in that domain, and then work with him or her, because then you can kind of like intimately understand, okay, what's working, what's not, and kind of like adopt some of their thinking, because eventually you're going to have to build out your marketing team. So if you're not learning from this freelancer, this person, then you're always just outsourcing this whole function, and your marketing costs are going to go out of control. So I think I kind of went that route because not that I did that in my first company. We weren't really doing a lot of D2C paid ads in my first company. So this was a completely new experience for me. But I just knew that there was no way I'm going to put, like even with raising 4.5 mil, there's no way I'm going to put a $300K marketing budget down to launch my product. That's just not how I think it's a smart way to launch.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like in the early days, parents' search terms on Google Ads was a marketing channel that was working. How has that changed now with AI being, a place for people where they kind of get their answers from and not going to Google? Is search still effective for you? What about the other channels like Meta ads, TikTok, influencer collaborations?
Yeah, so I think the search, again, it's not sustainable because there's only so many people that search for that term at any given time. So it's really hard to scale search. But again, I would use search early on as first approach to get your marketing message right. Again, search is not really a scaling channel. It's more like, what are people looking for? What's resonating? If you're, you test out a bunch of different messages, different ads, different like, because it's not even like, you can do images, but mostly it's like the words, right? So that, and then now we're translating the search type stuff to SEO. Like, so if people are searching eczema and they're seeing our eczema ad, I want that to be replaced by an eczema article, right? From an SEO perspective. So we're shifting that search strategy to SEO. But Meta is the scaling channel in a way because it's kind of like more untargeted. And unfortunately, when we started our company, it was a time when you can't target as well anymore in Meta, where they got rid of the tracking and the cookies and things like that. So it's definitely like very challenging to retarget people on Meta, for example. But that works for scaling channels, much more expensive for sure. But if you can optimize it with a lot of creatives and iterate very quickly on the images and the videos and UGC, user generated content, you can optimize it. I would say by far the best channel for us has been influencers, affiliate influencers. So very quickly also I experimented with social media. Like, can I break into TikTok? Is it Instagram? Is it YouTube and whatnot? I was born in 83, so I kind of I just couldn't get into the TikTok. I tried, I just couldn't get into the TikTok mind space. I also heard from friends that you may get a lot of traction there, but the conversion is very low. So we saw the same thing happen. So I knew that, I'm a heavy Instagram user. I post a lot of stories myself. So for me, and I'm kind of thinking that a lot of my audience, my customers are around my age, and they're maybe early, in their 30s, 40s, kind of having kids, young kids. So Instagram became our really high ROI platform. I think at one point we were 10 ROAS. So for every dollar we spend on Instagram, we got $10 back. And there were a lot of people talking about gut health already. There are influencers who people follow, or about eczema, about kind of eating healthy and all that stuff, right? And then we found a functional integrative practitioner group, this group of practitioners where they're helping parents with chronic conditions that conventional doctors just can't tackle, because I think conventional medicine is really good at targeting acute problems. Like if you're, I don't know, if you have a virus or if you broke a bone, conventional medicine is good. But if you have a chronic condition that recurs, that's where I think there's a huge gap in conventional medicine, and also taking a more holistic food as medicine based approach. And so there's a whole community on Instagram, even TikTok, on talking about that. So we tap into that market pretty efficiently. And even with that strategy, I've seen other brands kind of spend a lot of money, again, hiring agencies to do that strategy for them, to find influencers. What we did was I DM'd I work so closely with all these influencers. I think the first 100 influencers I met one-on-one. I talked to them. I shared my story over and over again. Genuinely from the heart, they saw that I experience the same problem they may be experiencing, and I genuinely want to help. And here's a test that can help your family. And I would walk them through their results personally and help them understand what's going on. And I truly, truly still do that today for some of the larger influencers. I still meet with them because I feel like I have to, again, learn who they are, similar to my customers, right? I have to understand what would make them truly believe in this product. If they're going to be my ambassador talking about my product and promoting it to their audience, most of the time they want to promote something that they truly believe in, right? And you can tell if an influencer is just saying, buy this product and take a picture, and kind of, it's a very shallow way of describing, versus someone's like, oh my gosh, you've got to hear about this. I did this test, my son's eczema went away, here's what I did. There's just a different sentiment. And so I think our influencer strategy remains very effective now, because they can tell we truly care about their health, and it's actually, it actually works, right? So it's a lot. I think as a founder, again, I think this, do you want to, what kind of company do you want to build, right? And, for me, I want to build a company who really represents my values and what I really care about. And I want that to permeate through everything. So kind of when we expanded beyond the 100 influencers, I have a team now kind of working on influencers, but they kind of embody the same values I do, right? So it really does translate to your company culture and company value as well.
Cheryl, you've had vast experience in innovation in different parts of it: software, consumer space, scientific e-commerce. Knowing what you know now, with all of that experience that you've gained in the years, if you want to start something again from scratch, it can be anything. It can be, normally I'd ask e-commerce fund, any e-commerce category, But recently I had a conversation which made me change my question. She came from a software background. She started a fertility healthcare, and now she said that she wants to go back and start software again. So that was interesting. So now I'm gonna keep it open for you. Knowing what you know now, would you, if you want to start something from scratch, would you start something in e-commerce? If yes, which category? If no, what would you do maybe in a technology space?
Well, I mean, it's hard to say, think about a new company when I'm such in the trenches of this current company and we're growing really quickly. And I wouldn't even say that we're e-commerce, to be frank. We seem like an e-commerce company, but frankly, we're a science company. We're more like there's a new term called tech bio, not biotech, right? Because we're not like a pure biotech company, but there's a lot of bio involved, right? And we're building the science and we're contributing, we're publishing papers and contributing back to science. So for me, it's very exciting. It's a combination of e-commerce and science or biology, microbiology. And then there's a software layer too. So like, how I talked about initially wanting to build a SaaS company. In the next growth stage of our company, our B2B partnerships are kind of like taking off, and like other brands want to co-brand or white label our platform because we have a really good platform that make microbiome science very easy to understand for a consumer report, and they want it for their business, right? So I'm talking about premium gyms, health assessment companies, a lot of these more biohacking communities. So again, interestingly enough, on the B2B side of the business, it's less parents and babies. It's more of now the longevity customers, the biohacking customers, the athletes, professional athletes who want to optimize their health because there's a huge wellness trend right now, right? And so we're next year building more of a SaaS platform to allow people like API access to our platform and pulling data. So like this company, again, even though I was laser focused on a consumer, like the type of persona initially, which is the mom, the baby audience, we've expanded beyond that now to the adult customer and a B2B side of the business, that it's so exciting. Like I can see myself working on this company for the next 10 years, frankly. And it's also a way of life for me. And this is where you truly feel like you're in flow, when you're not like itching for the next thing, but you feel like this company is the way I live anyway. The wellness space is what I love, and this is how I raise my family. And like, there's so much to do in a space that I'm like, I just can't see myself building another company. I don't know if that's answering your question.
Seems like you're in the right spot. You're not even thinking about anything else. That's great.
Yeah.
Cheryl, final two-part question. Top two problems giving you a headache right now, and top two priorities that you're excited about for the year for Tiny Health.
Yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time. We're growing really quickly, like we're doubling in revenue. We're only in our, we've only been around in the market for 2.5 years, and we've kind of doubled almost every year. And next year we're expected to more than double as well. I think it's what keeps me up at night is the challenge of feeling like, yeah, I'm running this B2C side of the business with consumers, which will always remain important for the company because that's where we get a lot of the novel data, longitudinal data to give back to science and do more research in disease and conditions and things like that. And then we have this B2B partnership part, which is a different product, right? Like more of a maybe slightly software product, SaaS model kind of thing, and working with different enterprise brands. So sometimes I feel like I'm running 2 to 3 companies in one, because there's the consumer like e-com part, there's the science part, which is very different, publishing papers, and then there's the B2B part. But I'm kind of, and some parts of me, I know as founders with limited resources, we've only raised 13 million. We're a Series A company, still pretty small to be running so many different business models. It does worry me, and I keep thinking, should I just focus on 1 or 2 things? But I have a very large ambition. I think our vision is very large in that Tiny has evolved from tiny babies to the tiny microbes in your gut, right? So that brand is expandable. Like it's not just only about tiny babies anymore. It's about the invisible tiny microbes in your gut. So we are wanting to be synonymous with every time you mention gut health in the future, gut testing, Have you gotten your gut tested? You think about tiny health, right? So it's a very big ambition. There's a lot of white space, a lot of opportunities there. And I do feel like I just need to be okay running 2 to 3 companies in one. But that is definitely a challenge for sure.
Cheryl Sew Hoy, thank you for sharing your journey with me.
Thanks for having me. This is fun.